let's talk about Spider-Man. He's most people's favorite superhero. I mean, for me, he's my second favorite superhero, but we're not going to talk about him because of that. We're not going to talk about him because he's one of the most popular superheroes ever created. We're not going to talk about him because he swings through New York in pajamas and somehow manages to make that look cool. We're not even going to talk about him because he's survived decades of villains, multiverses, alien symbiotes, and movie reboots. Let's talk about Spider Man because Peter Parker might secretly be one of the most psychologically relatable characters ever created. Underneath the web shooters, wisecracks, and superhero battles is a guy carrying a lot of responsibility. Too much responsibility. The kind of responsibility that starts out noble and ends up being exhausting. It's the kind that makes you feel guilty for resting, guilty for saying no, guilty when other people struggle, and guilty when you're not actively trying to solve someone else's problem. If you've ever felt that way, if you've ever been the fixer, the helper, the caretaker, or the person everyone relies on, then Peter Parker's story starts feeling less like a superhero story and more like a biography. At least, that's how I feel. Today, we're exploring Spider Man through the psychology of responsibility, guilt, people pleasing, and why some of us feel responsible for everyone around us. And as always, we are going to discover how Peter Parker can teach us to become a little more grounded in our own lives. Let's get into it. Welcome back, fellow mages, to the Grounded Mage, where we explore how myth and magic exist in everyday life. Before he became Spider Man, Peter Parker was a kid who often felt powerless. He is usually portrayed as intelligent but socially awkward. He's bullied, he's underestimated, he's often isolated. In many versions of the story, Peter grows up with Aunt May and Uncle Ben after losing his parents at a young age. Even before the spider bite, Peter's life contains loss. And loss changes how people view responsibility. Many psychologists have observed that people who experience significant loss early in life sometimes develop a stronger desire for control. Not because they want to control people, but because uncertainty feels dangerous. If you've experienced pain that arrived unexpectedly, your brain starts searching for ways to prevent future pain. Peter's story begins with being a young man who desperately wants to matter. He wants to make a difference. He wants to have some control over his life. Then a radioactive spider shows up and says, "Good news. Terrible side effects, but good news." After gaining his powers, Peter doesn't immediately become a hero. And honestly, that's one of the reasons he's so relatable. I mean, if we're being realistic, most of us probably wouldn't immediately start fighting crime either. We'd probably spend at least a week seeing if we could climb random walls. Peter discovers he can do incredible things. He's stronger, faster, more agile. People finally notice him. For perhaps the first time in his life, he feels powerful. And then comes the moment that defines everything: the thief. A criminal runs right past Peter. Peter can stop him easily, but he chooses not to. Why? Because he's angry. Someone has treated him unfairly, and he thinks, "That's not my problem." And later, that same criminal unalives Uncle Ben. Peter discovers the devastating connection. The man he could have stopped is the man who took away one of the people he loved the most. Everything changes. This moment creates one of the most powerful emotional wounds in fiction. Peter doesn't just lose Uncle Ben, he develops a belief that says, if I don't act, terrible things will happen. And that's where things get interesting psychologically. The famous lesson is, with great power comes great responsibility. It's a beautiful lesson. It's also one that Peter Parker takes way too far. See, healthy responsibility says, I should do what I can. But there's also toxic guilt, which says, if something bad happens, it's all my fault. Peter gradually shifts from one to the other, and we see it repeatedly through Spider Man stories. Every tragedy becomes personal, every failure becomes personal, every loss becomes personal. Psychologists call this personalization. It's a cognitive distortion where we assume excessive responsibility for events outside of our control. People who struggle with anxiety, who grew up taking care of others, or who learned that their value comes from helping others often experience this. And this one is personal for me as someone who is a decade older than their younger sibling. Peter Parker practically lives in this bubble. Here's a question for you. Have you ever blamed yourself for something that was totally out of your control? One of the most heartbreaking moments in Spider Man history is the death of Gwen Stacy. In many versions of the story, Peter desperately tries to save her. He is fast enough, strong enough, determined enough. But despite everything he does, she still dies. And Peter never fully forgives himself. This is an example of survivor's guilt. Survivor's guilt occurs when someone survives, succeeds, or remains unharmed while another person suffers. The person logically knows that they are not responsible. Emotionally, however, they still feel responsible. Peter knows he didn't push Gwen. He knows he was trying to save her. But emotionally, that doesn't matter. The guilt remains. And many people experience this after losing loved ones. They replay events endlessly. What if I'd called sooner? What if I'd said something different? What if I'd noticed the signs? What if I had done more? The painful reality is that guilt often promises certainty where none exists. If everything was your fault, then at least the world makes sense. But life doesn't work that way. Sometimes tragedy happens despite our best efforts. That's one of the hardest truths Peter spends his life learning. Let's shift from Gwen to the famous MJ. One of Peter's recurring struggles is his relationship with MJ. Why? Because Peter constantly believes that he must carry everything himself. He hides things, he keeps secrets, he pushes people away, he refuses to let anybody help him. Does that sound familiar? Researchers studying social support consistently find that people cope better with stress when they allow trusted relationships to share emotional burdens. Peter does the opposite. His internal rule often sounds like, if people help me, they'll get hurt. So he isolates himself. Many people who carry excessive responsibility do the same thing. They become emotionally independent, which sounds healthy until you realize it's actually emotional isolation wearing a fake mustache. When you're struggling, do you reach out or do you immediately try to handle everything yourself? I want to talk about something psychologists call the hero complex. It's not a clinical diagnosis, it's a behavioral pattern. The person feels compelled to rescue, save, fix, or protect everyone around them. Their self worth becomes tied to being needed. Now, to be clear, helping people is wonderful. Spider Man helps people because he genuinely cares. The problem emerges when helping becomes your entire identity. When your brain starts believing, if I'm not helping, I'm failing. Peter struggles with this constantly. He misses birthdays, relationships, school opportunities, career opportunities, not because he's selfish, because he believes every crisis is his responsibility. Some of us do exactly the same thing. We become addicted to being useful, and eventually we forget who we are when nobody needs saving. There's another psychological concept called parentification. This happens when children take on responsibilities beyond their developmental stage. I'm a kid of divorce with a much younger sibling and high strung family members, so I relate to this one because I had to grow up really fast and I ended up really hating conflict. These kids end up becoming the family mediator, the emotional caretaker, or just becoming responsible for keeping everyone fine. These children often become incredibly competent adults. But there's a catch. They frequently develop an exaggerated sense of responsibility. Their nervous system learns If I don't handle this, nobody will. Peter often behaves this way. He's constantly scanning for problems, constantly preparing for emergencies, constantly carrying burdens, even when nobody asked him to. Many viewers connect deeply with Spider Man because they aren't seeing a superhero, they're seeing themselves. Often considered the best Spider Man movie ever, probably because it's so psychologically relatable, it's Spider Man 2. Peter is exhausted. He's overwhelmed. Everything is falling apart. His grades suffer. His job suffers. His relationships suffer. His mental health suffers. And eventually, he loses his powers. Now, obviously, that part isn't scientifically accurate. I mean, most people don't lose wall crawling abilities because of stress. But metaphorically, it's brilliant because burnout feels exactly like that. Researchers Christina Maslock and Michael Leader describe burnout as emotional exhaustion, reduced effectiveness, and growing detachment. When you're burnt out, your body actually starts to shut down. It's going to stop functioning the way you're used to it functioning because it's trying to rest and recoup some energy just to keep you breathing. Peter experiences all of this. His body is basically screaming at him, "You cannot keep carrying the entire city." Just like you can't keep carrying your entire circle. One of the most important lessons Peter eventually learns is this: responsibility and control are not the same thing. You are responsible for your choices. You're not responsible for anyone else's. You are responsible for your effort, but you're not responsible for every outcome. You are responsible for showing up, but you're not responsible for guaranteeing success. The distinction sounds simple. It's life changing because many people spend years exhausting themselves trying to control things that were never theirs to control. Peter can't control villains. He can't control tragedy. He can't control everyone's decisions. He can only control how he responds. And that's true for all of us. Spider Man isn't inspiring because he's perfect. He's actually inspiring because he's the opposite. He falls, he fails, he makes mistakes, gets overwhelmed, questions himself, and keeps showing up anyway. But perhaps the most important lesson isn't about courage, it's about limits. Peter eventually learns that caring for everyone isn't the same as carrying everyone. Helping isn't the same as fixing. Loving isn't the same as rescuing. And responsibility isn't the same as guilt. And your worth is not measured by how many people you can save. Take a minute to consider these questions. Who in your life are you trying to rescue? What burden are you carrying that actually belongs to someone else? When was the last time you rested without feeling guilty? I mean, for me, it was probably when I was like 8 years old. What would happen if you stopped trying to control outcomes that you can't control? And what responsibility actually belongs to you? You don't have to answer these right now, but those questions might reveal where you're carrying more than your share. Spider Man's greatest challenge was never Green Goblin, or Dr. Octopus, or Venom. His greatest challenge was learning how to carry responsibility without letting it become guilt. And that's a challenge many of us face every single day. You can care deeply, you can help people, you can show up for those who you love, but you don't have to carry the entire world because that isn't responsibility. That's self sacrifice without limits. Even Spider Man eventually learns that he can't save everyone. And perhaps the most heroic thing we can do is learn that lesson before burnout teaches us the hard way. Thanks for listening. If today's episode resonated with you, I would love to hear your answer to this question: what responsibility are you finally ready to put down? Don't forget to leave a comment, like and share this video, subscribe, and I've also found journaling to be a very helpful exercise. Speaking of journals, if you are ready to explore your own personal growth journey, check out the Grounded Mage's Hero's Journey Journal. It's designed to help you identify the challenges, beliefs, fears, and transformations shaping your story so you can become the hero of your own adventure. There is a link for a freebie in the description down below, and if you like that, you can also purchase it from one of the links in the description down below. Next week, we head to Arendelle. We are exploring Elsa, emotional suppression, fear, authenticity, and what happens when we spend years hiding parts of ourselves from the entire world. Until next week, fellow mages, make it make magic.